Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome to No Man's Sky. I'm here taking a look at the latest update, Atlas Rising, which as you all no doubt know was released a few weeks ago. Now it does add a whole bunch of content to the game, and really I'm wondering whether or not the game deserved a second chance. Is it worth coming back and playing it? And if you don't already own the game, is it worth purchasing? Well, the update does bring along with it an entire bunch of new features, many of them in line with what was originally implied or suggested that should be included with the game at release, and others which are massive quality of life improvements. Some of the changes on the face of it are relatively minor, but they do bring an entirely different feel to the game, one of which is the ability to fly closer to the ground. Now for me, back during the original release, this was one of the biggest problems I had with the game. The fact it handheld you and wouldn't let you get close to the ground, in fact it wouldn't let you crash into anything at all. So now not only can you clip into scenery, but you can also fully crash your ship, bringing quite a bit of damage to it. So what does this mean? It means we can now fly through canyons, over mountains, and through other scenery. Unfortunately though, you still can't fly under things like that. If you do try, then the ship will absolutely refuse to do so, and more likely crash you into something in your attempt. But nonetheless, it really does now feel like you're actually flying a ship, or a little more so than it previously did. In many ways, this relatively minor update does a very good job of highlighting exactly where No Man's Sky is as a game now. As with the new flight model, the game itself is getting very close to what would be expected from a big space game of this type, and it's getting increasingly closer to many of the outlined features that were suggested there before release. Yet in many ways it's not quite there. However, these are no longer compelling enough reasons to avoid the game, and it's actually becoming a good game in its own right. So to perhaps drag out the analogy here of comparing the flight mechanics to the game itself, it's gone from a bumbling system that won't allow you to do anything you'd expect to be able to do, to a new system that allows you to do what you'd want to do with a few minor exceptions. And it would seem that that could perhaps be said of the game as well now. Now there is a nice new quick menu. I'm not sure which version of the game this was brought into, but if you're playing with a controller, simply push down on the D-pad and you get access to all these shortcuts, one of which is a great camera. Now I believe this come with a previous update. It's not new to the latest patch, but nonetheless it's new to me, so I did want to have a look at it, and it's rather flexible and can give you some great little screenshots if that's your thing. You can also change the time of day, and I believe you may be able to affect the weather as well, so it's quite flexible. A number of other changes are a complete overhaul of the introduction of the game. There's now a massive story side to it, and if you follow that through, the game will guide you through for around about 30 hours I believe. And this will take you through fixing up your first ship, getting to your first new planet, and eventually out to new systems. There's also been a new currency introduced. This is nanite clusters, and you can use these to purchase blueprints. Blueprints of course cover everything from enhancements to your ship, to your multi-tool, or to your exosuit, and they all have different prices, and they also have rank requirements to unlock them. So these are basically your reputation that you have with the particular alien species that is in charge of the store that you're accessing at the time. And yes, unfortunately some of the alien races have some particularly annoying voices, as you can hear in the background here, and I've had to turn this one right down. It's more than a little irritating. So as you progress through the early stages of the story, you will eventually find yourself led to a massive crashed freighter. And these you will remember from the very early trailers of No Man's Sky, so they are now at last in the game, and how they appear will generally depend upon where they're located, and of course this is all procedurally placed. Each planet is a little bit different, and the freighters too will look a little bit different on your playthrough. Unfortunately I had a rather ugly mushroom planet here, and this bilious green freighter here. Nonetheless, the scale of the things is pretty impressive, and I'm sure if you see this on a more appealing planet, it's going to look rather fantastic. So around the freighters you can find all sorts of loot, and if you go inside the wreckage, you'll be able to pick up a few bits and pieces. But essentially the main reason for coming here is a storyline based one. There is some equipment here that's essential to your journey through the galaxy. As previously though, you can do a freeform play. You don't have to follow the storyline. You do get the option multiple times through the game, allowing you to go back on the path, or to just do freeform exploring and go wherever you like, when you like. Personally though, I found the story side of things compelling enough to keep following the path to see where it takes me. And here is the path in question, the journey towards the centre of the galaxy. Now I know there was some controversy originally about what happens when you finally get there. No idea if that has been changed or that has been improved. I guess we'll find out when and if I actually make it. There are still the fuel requirements that you need to get from system to system. These come in the form of warp cells as previous, and you will need to keep a stock of these to enable you to constantly travel, or else you can build them or pick them up en route. Since the game's release, there's always been a fleet of ships travelling around, and as of a previous patch, you could dock with these and even go as far as purchasing one of these freighters for yourself. Quite an epic purchase. It does cost an extreme amount of money, but it's a nice touch. Talking of new ships, you can still find them as wreckages dotted around planets. However, one change is that they are now more extensively damaged than they were previously, with many of these additional slots here requiring money to unlock. Now each slot requires an increasing amount of money to unlock, so it can get pretty expensive to fully unlock a ship like this one that has 30 slots or even more. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping it's actually cheaper than purchasing a ship of this size outright. Now unfortunately the new ship is more of a transporter rather than a combat ship, which means I didn't extensively get a chance to try out the new combat mechanics that are in the game. But apparently these are now vastly improved, and one thing that's for sure, there certainly seems to be a lot more laser fire than I actually remember, and you can just see some friendly units flying along there and taking on the enemies. I got a bit closer to this fleet hoping that I'd get a little bit of help from them, and that seemed to actually pay off a bit. So one thing that I felt was actually lacking in the original release was not only a lack of direction, but a lack of things to do in the game. So the new introduction here of a mission board is a great help for that. These are naturally rather generic missions. Just go here and kill 5 monsters, go there, collect that item and bring it back to me, but nonetheless they make for a great diversion. And because of the scale of the game, because of the scale of the environments, it does mean that you'll now find yourself having a reason to go out exploring. Each of these missions comes with a different type of reward. This one pays some more nanite clusters, but sometimes you'll just get outright credits, other times you'll get other rewards. So the mission I accepted there was for a discreet cargo transport, and you actually have to go and find the item he's asking for you to find and then deliver it to another location before coming back here to collect your reward. The mission log does a great job of allowing you to keep track of what you actually need to do, and it separates out main missions from these side missions that we've just collected there. Unfortunately, what the mission log didn't do, at least as far as I could see, was give you a clear indication of what you need to kill or what you need to collect. But when you do go into the log and make the mission active, you get a little notification down there on the bottom right hand side of the screen, which you just saw has now disappeared, and that keeps track of the progress. So there you can see exactly what you need to collect and exactly what you need to kill. Now talking of creatures, they do seem to have improved somewhat, but on the odd occasion you do come across some of them which have some very funky animations. Just look at that. Some of them can be very aggressive, but on other occasions they just find themselves walking in circles trying to get away from you, and before they fall to their rather ungracious death animation there. Another nice new feature is the ability to summon your ship. Now you will need to make sure that it's still got fuel in its thrusters, because if you try and summon it without that, it will simply say the thrusters are inactive. But other than that, you can find yourself summoning your ship whenever you want, wherever you want. And this is a great touch, because quite often you find yourself walking many miles across the surface of the planet before you finally have to turn around and backtrack over that entire same distance again. So that's now a thing of the past. Here I am then, handing these missions in. I managed to do all 3 of them on the same planet. And I actually used these nanite clusters to go to the store next door and purchase a new blueprint. Now the building features that are in the game are not something that I've actually come across just yet, although from what I understand they are included in a part of the story elements of the game. Another thing I unfortunately haven't had a chance to try is the new multiplayer aspects of the game. Now these are very limited. You can basically explore with other players, but the other player appears as an orb of light. So a very basic implementation of multiplayer, but at last it is there, at least in some form. Now you may remember the previous terrain modification tool, the one that you basically had to shoot the ground to put holes in it. That's now been completely replaced by the terrain manipulator, and this you can use to create complete new objects out of rock. And I guess we don't have to use too much imagination to think of what is likely to be the most created feature with this particular tool. Now you can use this to create shelters, and that will get you away from the elements, but you can also use it to rapidly destroy huge chunks of the ground, and this makes mining or digging down into the depths much easier than it was previously. You also get a number of different materials you can use to construct these various objects, and if you look here, there's about 6 of them or so, and they all appear in different colours. Now if you do create some terrain around existing buildings, then the terrain will wrap around it very nicely. And what this means is that you can create buildings that are embedded in massive cliffs or massive caves. The different material types also blend together rather nicely, and they each blend with the ground quite well as well. So where does this leave us with No Man's Sky? Well, the fact is I've been playing it for quite a few hours now, and I didn't jump straight on this and make a video as soon as the patch was released because I did want a bit of time to spend with it and have a good look at what it's all about. And I've got to say, it is a game that, for me at least, is very much worth playing. So if you've already got the game, then it's certainly worth heading back and checking out again once you've got the update. If you haven't got the game, it's very much a question of how much you're willing to spend on it. And unfortunately, right at the moment, the game is still £40 on Steam. I do believe it had staled relatively recently, but that has now ended. So yeah, £40 is quite a lot of money. It's the price of a brand new game. But then again, you may be able to get quite a lot of hours out of this. If you've got access to a PlayStation 4, however, then it's a much easier purchase. It's currently selling for about £15 on Amazon. And that's for a brand new copy, or else you can get it second hand if you go into a computer store like Game for around about the same amount of money. So is the game finally living up to expectations and the massive feature list that was there before launch? Well, that really is the question, isn't it? I've actually played this update for around about 10 hours before making this video, and that was an enjoyable 10 hours. I could have gone on for a lot longer and brought much more footage here. It's also certainly a game I'm going to be playing a lot more of now. The addition of the story mode and the mission boards really do bring the game to life. Added to that, the quality of life changes have taken the edge off many of the more tedious aspects of the game that were quite off-putting back in the initial release. But the original feature list was very large and just kept on growing, not to mention the things that were shown off in some of the trailers, such as sandworms and exquisitely animated dinosaurs. I don't know if those are in the game yet. I haven't seen a sandworm myself, but maybe they're out there somewhere, who knows. But yeah, I do think the game is getting closer to what was originally suggested the game was gonna be. And at the end of the day, the game is now a year old, and I don't know whether or not they're still selling many copies of this, but to get massive updates a year after release is a rather nice touch. And let's be honest, it's not the only letdown in big games over recent years. Of course, there's other such games such as Mass Effect Andromeda, which I doubt will be getting updates in the manner that this one. Indeed, they've actually said there's going to be no more single player updates for that particular game. But of course, comparing No Man's Sky to releases from other publishers or other studios doesn't really say anything about the rights and wrongs of it. But what I will say is that as it stands right now, it's certainly a very interesting game, and a game that I know I'll be playing quite a bit over the coming weeks and the coming months, hopefully. So there's certainly a lot of new content here, and with the addition of the patches that have been released over the recent year, the game is very much in a different place than it was at release. It's certainly a very different flavour of space game to something like Elite Dangerous, but at the end of the day, we've got space, we've got planets, and we've got spaceships, space stations, as well as, well, relatively large fleets and frigates as well. So if you've got an itch to check out some space games, if you want to go and explore the old sci-fi worlds that look very much like the covers off of old 50s, 60s and perhaps even 70s sci-fi novels, then No Man's Sky is certainly more than just something to look at now, and comes with some fairly compelling gameplay. That then brings us to an end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.